ADHD Rewired, episode 459. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free and secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups. Learn all about our award-winning coaching and accountability groups. You can co-work with us in our Adult Study Hall virtual membership community. You can do all of these things by going to our website at ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. We are here with our live Q&A today. If this is your first time here at the Q&A, let me introduce everyone here. We have Kat Hoyer, who's one of our ADHD Rewired coaches, recovering HR manager. And we have Will Kerb, who is the host of Hacking Your ADHD. And we have Lisa Cisa, my executive assistant and community manager, and our resident neurotypical. And we have Kristen Martz, who is also an ADHD Rewired coach, and she's also a therapist. And we have MJ, who is the host of ADHD Diversified, and that is me. So hello, everybody. If you're listening to this on the podcast, happy December. For everyone here, we are in November. So let's dive right in. I've already confused Kristen, it looks like, with my intro and almost made her spit like her drink out of her nose. So Erin, what is your question?
Hi, my question is, I'm wondering how you've learned how to accept your ADHD. I find myself grieving all the time loss, how many mistakes I've made since I have such a late diagnosis. I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, like all the things that I would have done differently. Yeah. So I'm just wondering how you cope with it.
Yeah, I love this question. How long have you been diagnosed for?
Technically, it's been a couple of years, but I didn't actually know what it meant to have ADHD. My psychiatrist was like, do you lose things? Are you still a little bit flaky? And I was like, yep. He's like, okay. But I never understood like the stuff that you work on in the coaching program, the behavioral stuff. So it wasn't until I had like a break in the middle of the spring that I realized what it meant to have ADHD. So I kind of count it from March, I guess.
Okay. You know, Erin, you said that you're kind of going through, you're grieving right now. And that is how we get to acceptance, is through the grief process. And it's not a linear process like grieving a loss of a loved one, right? This is something that will be cyclical throughout our life. So the fact that you can even name it as grief, I think is great. And I think even gives you a bit of a leg up than other people that don't have that language to identify what they're kind of going through. For me personally, I'll tell you that when I was diagnosed, when I was 19 years old in college, part of my personal process was witnessing my dad, who had a brain injury when I was 14, and he struggled to accept. It was a struggle to watch him not accept, right? Because he had new impairments, and he kept trying to do the stuff that he used to do. And it was, so for me, that sort of imprinted on my life of like, we can't change certain things. What we don't have to do is fight against what is, right? And so I think that is one of the biggest things that kind of leads towards that acceptance, and acceptance doesn't mean that we have to love having ADHD. There is plenty of days that I would much rather not have ADHD because it definitely gets in the way. But I think the more we can understand how to work with our strengths and then also understand sort of the challenges that we have and how to work around those, it gets better. And it does get easier. It just takes time. Kristen?
So many thoughts. First of all, I love that you added cyclical because that even got me thinking more. So I was met with this challenge well before the idea of ADHD with myself, in that I'm a mother of a human who is severely autistic. And the cyclical piece that would come up for me is because I worked with dancers and girls and boys who were growing and changing, and they would do things like send me invitations to their graduations and stuff. And it took me a long time to realize why I was so upset by that. And it was that cyclical grief of, oh, this is something else she doesn't get to have. It finally got better for me when I looked at it kind of two ways. I love the idea of chapters in your story and that it's that turning point for the character you are. I like being those characters too. So that just is more about me. And noticing that and going, okay, that's a new chapter. And I also wonder the idea of grief, we think of loss. So what about just the idea of rebirth? I love the reframe. I'm like queen of spinning it. I love spinning our thoughts and our stories. So that idea too of how could you reframe it that really speaks to you and resonates for you? Not to put it away, but we are talking about grief and loss. And so what can come from grief and loss?
Thanks, Kristen. MJ?
For me, I think I still grieve in a lot of ways, even though I've accepted it. There's a lot of times when I sit here and I'm like, God, I wish I was diagnosed younger, or I wish I would have known sooner. I think a lot of us say that if we're diagnosed as adults, that we wish we would have known sooner. For me personally, because of some of my cultural background and being primarily surrounded by Asian communities, I think if I was diagnosed earlier and was treated earlier, there's a strong chance that I probably wouldn't be here now. As much as I'm like, I really wish I would have known, like it just makes sense. Grieving the person I could have been, grieving the successes I could have had. But then I think about it and I'd probably honestly be doing something I hate just because I found out sooner, just because I'd be functioning better. And I think that would be a whole different way of grieving the person that I would have wanted to be versus the person that I was expected to be just because of being able to function in a way that is expected of us societally. So yeah, as much as I grieve, I also don't think I would have had the willpower to advocate for what I actually really wanted if I was diagnosed earlier. So the best part now is you get to choose how you want to move forward with the knowledge and the tools that you have now, and with the knowledge and the tools that you'll gain through this process. It's not going to be easy. There's still going to be moments of grieving, even when you think you've gotten over it. That's my experience anyway. So I hope for you that, you have the support you need so you can maybe at least grieve a little less as time goes on and celebrate where you are right now, which is here, and celebrate the possibility of you. What Kristen said, sort of that rebirth of grieving what was and celebrating what could be.
Thanks, MJ. And if you've not listened to ADHD Diversified, MJ's podcast, I feel that there are so many of the episodes that MJ's really kind of taking you through her process of acceptance. And, there's definitely episodes where there's more of a struggle and she's sharing that. And other times she's kind of on the other side of that and she shares that. So it's not like this linear, neat, sequential process. It's a dance, and we're tripping on our own toes often with this stuff. Kat?
I think one of my favorite things that we talk about in the coaching program is that understanding our ADHD doesn't change the past, but it changes our understanding of the past. Yeah. So now I'm able to go back, and part of my grieving process, I don't think I'll ever love that I have ADHD. There are aspects of it that I'm like, I like this, but what does help me accept it more? And, when I look through, I have a marriage that ended, and it was almost 100% due to the way ADHD manifested. Well, also due to how he responded to the way ADHD manifested. But I lost jobs because of it. And the way I reframe that is I did not have a spouse that was willing to support me through the challenges and things like that. So I actually am better off, as hard as that was, I'm better off not being with that partner. And we have a good relationship now. The other thing with the jobs, the same thing. Those weren't the right jobs for me because it just wasn't right for me. Now, what has happened because of that experience, I think two things. One is I'm an incredible advocate for people in those situations where I want to help them now, and I want to help people in the workforce, and I want to help companies understand individuals that have a neurodivergent brain. So it has helped me shape the person I am. And I like who I am now, where I didn't before when I didn't understand all of this. The other thing that I think has helped tremendously is community, to be able to be around people that have a brain like mine. And I think they're fucking awesome, and all the different personalities and talents and gifts and all of these things. And we're all so different, but yet there's this like, I'm one of them. If I'm one of them, and they're fucking awesome, that means I'm fucking awesome too. So that has helped me tremendously. And it's helped me with, surround myself with people who are much more accepting. And even my neurodivergent or my neurotypical friends, now I know that what kind of friends I need to have because of that. So that's my sort of silver lining, but that doesn't mean that it's rainbows and kittens and unicorns flying out my butt all the time.
And there's that. Will.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the non-linearness of the accepting of ADHD, because it's really important to remember that, I have days where I'm like, yeah, of course I have ADHD. That's why I do all these things. And then other days I'm like, why can't I get this done? And it's literally, my ADHD is making me forget about the fact that I have ADHD. And I'm sitting there like, why is this so hard? And then a little voice in my head is like, hey, maybe it's the ADHD. And I'm like, thank you. Because it's really hard to always keep that in the forefront because you don't really need to. And then when you hit these roadblocks, you're like, but why? And then that can be really frustrating at that moment where you're just like, but I want to do it anyway. It's taken me a long time to try and get to the like, well, I want to do it anyway. And I'm still like, maybe I could this time no. How can I find better ways to work with my brain? And it's hard to do, but it is an important thing to try and be like, this is what I have.
Thanks, Will. All right. So I hope that was helpful, Aaron. And I think to kind of echo again what Kat was just saying about community, like when we are with our people who get us, we don't have to sort of explain ourselves, and we recognize the struggle, and we also see people succeeding, that really helps. That really, really helps. All right. Let's pull Leslie up here. All right. So Leslie, what is your question?
Hi, thanks. So I'm wondering how you keep yourself from comparing your progress and productivity with that of your neurotypical colleagues, especially those who are especially high achieving. I keep beating myself up for not keeping up, especially since I feel like I could maintain that pace at earlier times in my life before my ADHD really got bad.
I'm self-employed, and there's a big reason that I'm self-employed.
Right.
Because for me, it was a lot of masquerading, a lot of having to work twice as hard, getting half as much done. So, I created an environment for myself that allows me to work mostly in my areas of strengths. The fact that I don't have to spend time doing like case notes as like a typical clinician would. Because I hated doing case notes. I don't know. It's tough because it's when we put ADHD aside, comparison, it is one of the most surefire ways to misery when we are comparing ourselves to others, because we are comparing our inside to somebody else's outside, which is not a fair comparison.
Right.
Kristen?
I don't know how healthy this is, but your question made me reflect on what did I do before I was self-employed. And it's that idea of, I did more quality work. I may not have been able to keep up and get my notes all in on time, but I sure as hell was making better impacts with the families I worked with. I'm a therapist also. So there was obviously truth to that, but there was also a lot of, maybe self-aggrandizing. Is that the right word for that? Kind of to help me get through the day. So again, I'm not sure. I would have to really reflect on that. How healthy was that? And was it a true reality check? But your question just led me to the first answer I thought of. So I actually appreciate this question because it's going to give me something to reflect on more.
Leslie, what do you do?
I'm an academic. So I'm both a history professor and I'm a faculty developer. I'm associate director of a Center for Teaching and Learning. So I help faculty be a little bit more thoughtful about their teaching in higher ed.
Okay. So do you have certain markers for yourself? Because that's what we really want to be doing, is comparing ourselves to ourselves. Like, how was I doing last year compared to this year? How am I doing last week compared to this week?
Yeah. I mean, I have annual goals that I set, and we have a very formal, actually go through two formal, as both a staff member and a faculty member, two formal evaluation processes each year. Plus we assess everything we do, which of course doesn't make things any easier. It's very demoralizing, even though the evaluations are good.
Is there anything that is in your control to make it less demoralizing and more empowering?
I think it's all internal work. Right. I don't think it's anything external. And there's the rub, because I'm out at work as someone with ADHD and I'm an advocate for students who are neurodiverse. and neurodivergent and for colleagues, but it's holding myself to a higher standard than I would hold anyone else, I think is the part of the issue. And then I also, because I'm in academia, I just work with incredibly high capacity, brilliant people.
So how much of this is imposter syndrome?
Right. How much of it is imposter syndrome and how much of it is me letting the culture gaslight me into thinking I'm not enough, right?
Yeah, that's, and I very much relate to that being out as ADHD. There's definitely that sort of like, oh shit, I got to kind of have my shit together. I can't be like so much of a hot mess because then what will people think? Like, that definitely crosses my mind sometimes. That definitely emerges for me on occasion. But yeah, these are kind of things that we can work through too with community, with therapists. I always think it's really hard when we have to really, really kind of take a step back and evaluate, are we in a healthy work environment or in a toxic work environment? Because sadly, there are way too many toxic work environments that people, especially I think with ADHD, feel that they, quote unquote, should just put up with. And I'm not so sure that's, how healthy that really is.
Right.
MJ?
I think the original quote is comparison is the thief of joy. And comparison is the thief of the beautiful, unique person you are in your field. That's kind of the only thing I have to offer. I guess the questions that I do have, though, is are there any areas of your work that might help enhance the strengths that you do have? Like, what are the things that you've used or utilized that you found brought you the most success in the field that you're in and the work that you're in?
Those are really great questions, and I won't bore you with the details. But yeah, I've been gradually trying to work my way toward, making space for myself that work toward my strengths. But then, of course, there's still, but then there's this other person who's at the same level as me, same age as me, neurotypical, who manages to just quantitatively keep up with their email or run far more events every year than I do, manage more people, stay on top of things. I'm shooting all over myself, to borrow many a therapist's term, in terms of how I should be keeping up. But those are great questions, MJ.
So I'm hearing somebody else is doing more. What if the reframe is not doing more in terms of quality or quantity, not doing more, but having more quality in the things that you are doing?
Yeah, and that is how I've been trying to look at it, because I do feel as if I do very high quality work. My issue is that sometimes, and I'm not made to feel this way, like I have no evidence that anyone is making me feel this way, but I feel as if I'm not carrying my fair share of the work of our center.
How many other people who are doing similar stuff to what you're doing there are also courageous badasses, being advocates, being out for people with ADHD and neurodivergent students, being a professor with ADHD? Because I think that's fantastic. And on behalf of all of those students who haven't thanked you, thank you.
Well, thank you. And I was diagnosed, I'm 47 and I was diagnosed at 43. So this has been a very recent journey for me, and it was a completely surprise diagnosis. I was not expecting it. So I've had to learn a lot very quickly. And I've long been an advocate for students with disabilities. It's been such a real joy to be able to take a deep dive and learn more about our shared experiences. So thank you so much for taking my question. I really appreciate it.
Kat, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
I do. I want to jump in because I'm going to be leading the witness a little bit. Leslie, how much do your values matter to you? How much where does productivity fit in there with your values and also your worth?
It doesn't, and it shouldn't matter. Productivity shouldn't matter to my worth, but it does, just because I came up in a culture in academia and outside of it where that is just the way that we are all measured, right?
What advice would you give one of your students who came to you with the same question? I would probably first tell them to follow their heart, but then work through, the particulars with them, because they come from such different backgrounds. Try to be realistic with what resources they have available to them. If someone came to me with my same resources, which are significant, fortunately, I have a lot of privilege, I would say, you need to get your head on straight. You just have this one life, and you need to figure out what your values are and live alignment with those values and keep those in mind.
Do you have any cues in your environment to sort of remind you of this on a regular basis about your values and your why?
I do. I keep a folder of thank yous from people who have recognized the work that I've done that matters to me, because it's very easy in academia to say, well, I've published this many peer review papers in high ranking journals that 6 people will read, versus, oh, well, I put on this event for 200 people and I got these great kudos. But none of that counts, of course. when it's time for promotion. And I'm lucky enough to already be tenured. I think that part of the disconnect too is there are measurements in academia, and I'm fighting to change these, but it's a slow process and it feels a little selfish, honestly. There are measurements in academia that are sort of almost universally accepted. By those standards, I struggle to meet the minimum, right? There's a lot of institutional change work that has to go on, and that doesn't count toward promotion.
It is a process, right? And I think it's true with all things ADHD. When we're going after something, like we want those results yesterday.
True.
So it's, whatever we need to do to kind of just remind ourselves that we actually are doing the best we can. Yes, our best might be different every day or every week, but if you're out there doing the fight, if you're out there really trying to make an impact, what else can we ask for?
It's a great opportunity. You're right. And I need to remind myself of that I have that privilege to be able to do that work and get paid for it. So thank you.
You bet, Leslie. Thanks for your question. All right. Let's take a quick break. We have a bunch of other questions that we're going to get to after the break. So we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from ARC. ARC is ADHD Rewired Coaching. Learn more about our award-winning coaching and accountability groups at coachingrewired.com. We just finished our last week of our 30th season of coaching and accountability groups, which means season 31, our winter season, is just around the corner, starting in January 2023. Registration is happening now for our next season of coaching groups. So that website again is coachingrewired.com to start your pre-registration process. Do you have goals or projects that excite you, but you're feeling stuck and don't know where to start? How would your life change by working on these goals? Have you been told that your dreams and goals are too big, so you put your life on hold, and now you decided it is time to let yourself dream big again? If you want to invest in yourself, to not only create your own personalized strategies to go from time blind to time wise, or have your calendar reflect your priorities while setting healthy boundaries, but you also want to improve your self-talk, ask better questions, and give yourself permission to dream big and take action on the goals that matter to you, then this is the group you've been looking for.
When this coaching group came up, I had just moved out of my house. I was a mess, like a hot mess.
Before this group, I doubted my ability to grow.
Before this group, I worried a lot about being perceived as too needy.
Prior to this group, my definition of success definitely had a lot to do with how other people perceived things I was doing or had done, and if they deemed them successful.
So success before included knowing how to work on a big, complicated, long-term project from the start and getting it right perfectly, or at least extremely well the first time, and doing it all at once.
I was newly diagnosed just about a year and a half ago, and I had lived so many years doing the best I could. And the diagnosis really just opened a door to a whole host of resources that I didn't ever know was there for me. This course seemed to be the holy grail.
I've learned that I don't need anybody else to define what successful means to me, and that I am pretty darn successful on a daily basis.
The thing that I learned was I have a place in this world.
The thing I'm most proud of is that in the middle of some pretty intense chaos in my personal life and not knowing really what's going to happen in the future, having kind of the rug pulled out from under me, that I'm still here.
Now I feel a lot more comfortable with voicing things that I need, or being able to just talk about what is or is not working and not bringing too much judgment into that.
Now, success is planning what I can see as the first steps and starting.
I found these great people that, it's so funny. When I first got in AA, there was this really annoying lady that would always say, I'm so happy to be around people that think like I do. And I was always like, I'm never going to say crap like that. But here I am going, I'm so happy to be around these people that think like I do. It's just such a relief to know that you're not alone, that you might not think like everybody around you, but you certainly think like a bunch of people that are in the world.
I'm most proud of the fact that I'm part of a group of people that are from all over different places, and are all grown adults that were able to come together and be real and open and vulnerable and put so much love and effort into each other to help each other get to the other side. I think we've all come a long way, and I'm really proud to be a part of your group.
Go to coachingrewired.com to get your name added to our winter interest list so you can stay in the loop for when our next registration event will be. That's coachingrewired.com to learn more and to get started with your pre-registration process. Don't wait, because we are filling up. Come grow with us. That's coachingrewired.com. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from Adult Study Hall, our virtual co-working and body doubling community for adults with ADHD, just like you and me, at adultstudyhall.com. It's free for the very first week and then only $19.99 a month after that. Whether you're preparing for the holidays and need to write your greeting cards or get started on DIYs, or if you want to get decluttered for the new year and want to close those loops on your to-do list, then join me and hundreds of other adults with ADHD who just get it at adultstudyhall.com, where you can get more done in our facilitated sessions or by joining our 24/7 drop-in room. That's adultstudyhall.com, where you can jump into our 24/7 drop-in room or any of our facilitated sessions so you can get unstuck and start crossing off your toughest to-dos. Give it a try. This is the body doubling community for adults with ADHD who want to get things done but don't want to do them alone. Remember, access to Adult Study Hall is only $19.99 a month and free for the first week to try. You can even cancel your membership at any time without any penalties. Come work with us. That's at adultstudyhall.com. And we're back. All right, we have Sharon. Sharon, what is your question?
I am considering going back to college part-time, and I'm having a hard time not getting freaked out about writing papers and exams. So I just need to know, how do I figure out how to do it differently from the last 2 failed attempts that I've had? I've dropped out 2 times I've tried it, mostly because of the anxiety around exams and papers. I also have a hard time staying awake reading texts. I've heard that some people with ADHD have that particular problem. So I want to do it differently. I just don't know how.
What do you want to go back to school for? What subject?
I'm embarrassed to say. It's coaching, life coaching.
Why are you embarrassed to say? That's amazing. Awesome. Okay, so what have you done before? What areas of study?
Well, the first time was just general university. So it was like political science, French and English. And the second time was for accounting.
Okay, so taking a look at the last 2 areas of studies that you did, were you interested in that stuff, or was it boring to you?
It was pretty boring.
Okay. So you feel you're pretty interested in coaching?
Yes.
Okay. So that right there, if like all other things being equal, that right there is going to make a huge difference, because interest is part of ADHD, right? Mm-hmm. When we are interested in something, our brain it's happy. It likes doing the things that it's interested in doing. Right?
For 2 weeks anyway.
Yeah, maybe.
What do I do in the third week?
So there's definitely the skills and strategies for adult learning that you can explore. But there's also the advocacy piece, right? I struggled like profoundly with writing papers in college. I still can't believe that I wrote a 75-page dissertation in grad school. I look back at it now, I'm like, I have no idea how I pulled that off. Because it once took me literally an entire semester to write a 3-page paper, working on it for like hours every single day, because I got it incomplete one semester. And my professor gave me the worst due date ever, which was, whenever you get done with it, turn it in, right? Which from that I learned, don't ever accept that as a due date. So advocating for what works best for you, and if you can bend something more towards your interest. So if you're given an assignment and you're like, I would be a little bit more interested in it if it took this angle or this approach, ask your teacher if you could approach it that way. The worst that happens is they say no. I did that all through my undergrad and grad school, and I never got a no answer. You can also do presentations, sometimes instead of papers. Like there are alternatives. Like the teacher wants to see you learn, right? So if you know what you do best and you know what the challenges are, begin with advocacy. That self-advocacy piece is so powerful.
Okay.
Kristen?
Thank you.
When were you diagnosed?
It was earlier this year.
So, in thinking about the story you can talk to yourself about is that you attended college. First of all, you had some persistence. You may have walked away from it because it wasn't working for you, and you went back and tried again. And you didn't have this awareness that you have now, and lots of new skills and tools, and this huge support community that you are always, I see you in all these events and things. And so just the sheer knowledge that you have a whole different environment and support system and tools around you that is going to be completely different might help you kind of put those stories to bed and look at this as a whole new adventure for yourself.
I'm really hoping, like I do tell myself that this is not the same. It's a different type of schooling. It's a different, like I'm not a single parent anymore and that sort of thing. Yeah, it's just that all those old messages are so hard to get rid of.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that. And I wouldn't stop trying to reflect on that and find other meanings behind it. Find other, it's almost like silver linings, like Kat had shared. What did you gain from those experiences? And figuring some of those things out. So that is my share.
How to run as far as I can, as fast as I can. That was what I learned.
Sure. Are you taking medication?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so that's another huge difference.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I still remember when I was first diagnosed, that very first time. I mean, it's a story that I've told 1,000 times, and I still get choked up sometimes telling the story because it was the first time I took Adderall where I read a chapter of a book and I actually knew what I read because my mind didn't start wandering in 1,000 directions while reading.
Yeah.
Because I would just keep reading. I've read all the words. I have no idea what I read because I was thinking about 10,000 other things. And so just that experience of having the medication was huge. Kat, do you have to follow up?
If I'm not mistaken, Sharon, are you taking on some leadership roles in the community, perhaps? Yeah.
Kind of. Well, yes. I'm facilitating one of the groups. I can't remember which one. Peer support. Maybe. That's it. Yeah.
So I'm going to borrow some ADHD rewired phrases because I don't know where they all came from, but bend the world to you. What I mean by that is while you're running that and helping other people talk about what their experiences are, you get to do that as well. And that's where kind of as an entrepreneur, as Eric was saying before, that's something that we can do is bend the world to us. So you get to practice that skill of when you run into different issues of, leaning into community and saying, hey, how would you handle this? And I know you've helped a lot of people in their journeys. And that's what happens is that they get to return that favor for you.
Yeah, it is different in that respect for sure. And having a community of people.
And I think when we're doing something where we can immediately see the application of how we're going to use something we're learning, it's just profoundly a different experience, right? Yeah. Like I remember in my undergrad when I took stats, oh my gosh, it was torture. I got a very undeserved C. I took it in community college because I couldn't pass it at the university. And when I took it in community college, I had a professor and we confuse words like is and isn't. And in stats, that kind of changes everything. So on the final exam, he attached the answer key to the back of everybody's test and walked out of the room. I'm fairly certain that was done on purpose. And because of that, I got a C. So that's my undeserved C. I didn't understand any of it. But then in grad school, when it's applied research methods, we're actually doing actual research. I loved it. And it was all the same concepts, but now I had a why behind it. Because for me, without a why, there's like very little chance for me to understand it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So again, it goes back to interest. When we are interested in something, our brain just does so much better.
Okay.
You got it, Sharon. You're on the right path.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Let's go to another question. Thanks, Sharon. All right. Let's answer Juliet's question of how do you each protect your sleep? Anybody else want to answer this one?
What?
Anyone? Does anyone with good sleep hygiene here want to answer this question?
I can talk a little bit to this.
Okay.
I mean, it isn't, I'm not the poster child by any means. And I have definitely learned much better in the last several months, I'd say 6 to 8 months of managing my energy throughout the day so that when it is time for sleep. I'm actually tired in the right way. The other thing, the most important thing is boundaries with others and boundaries with myself. And I've been very, I'm fortunate that I work with people who understand when I say, I need to protect my energy right now. They're like, okay, see you later. The other part of that though, is that even within my house, of course, it's my son and I, but he also is very obliging. But the biggest one is honoring it for myself. And a lot of that is the self-talk that I'm saying and explaining to myself why I need to do this, and then creating habits around it. Because I've done the pre-work of this, now I'm at the point of creating habits around that. As soon as I do, I'll probably change my schedule and those habits won't work anymore, but that's okay. It's all practice.
Kristen?
Not a poster child either, obviously. What happened to me last night was of greater value than my sleep. So speaking to that, I was up all night at the emergency room with my adult daughter who needed some emotional support and was really worried about how she was feeling. She's okay. Yeah, so I got no sleep. And it is one of the most packed days I've had in forever of commitments, like coming to the Q&A. I had physical therapy this morning. I agreed to sub-teach dance today. And then I have a coaching group tonight. And it's voting day. So a lot of things on my plate. And there's several pieces to this that I'm still continuing to grow and learn and notice. Is when something like this happens, I'm protecting my next night's sleep by not falling prey to, oh, but I need some rest. I'm going to go take a nap. I mean, at least for me, it doesn't work that way. Because if I went and took a nap, I wouldn't get back up. And then I would lay awake all night the next night. So that's one way when something like this comes into play, I still honor the next day. I don't let that happen. And
Kristen,
then
Juliet put a clarifier in the question box. They should have said strategies to use and try to keep on track to get to bed.
Okay, so this is the next piece I wanted to offer, is that my husband being, neurotypical, not rigid with pattern, habit, and routine, and has some flexibility around that, but fairly regular. And one of the things I notice is it's nice to go to bed when he goes to bed, or to play a game with myself and go, because I have an idea about when he's going to go. And if I'm struggling with the idea of staying awake, I go, I'm going to beat him into the bed. I'm going to go and get into the bed and maybe open a book or something, because I love to gamify things. So that is something that I will do. Challenges and things of who can get the most sleep, that sort of thing. That's me being big on games and reminding myself how wonderful it is when I can wake up and it's not a huge struggle.
Yeah, it's whenever I really try to talk to my future self, knowing that my future self will absolutely thank me for not fooling myself into think that I can just go on Facebook for 5 minutes before bedtime. It's like, how many times do I need to lie to myself that I can do that for 5 minutes and can't ever do that for 5 minutes? All right. So I will sometimes literally say out loud to myself, don't do it. Because that actually saying that out loud, that sort of out loud self-talk is a really useful strategy, because it actually activates other areas of the brain that just thinking something doesn't do. MJ?
Also not a poster child for this, as evidenced by my earlier outburst of what? So before I could employ any strategies to try to get to bed on time or at an ideal time, I had to work internally first. A lot of journaling and a lot of tracking in a different way, kind of what Kat said with the energy management throughout the day. So before I could get on track with, instead of going to bed at 2 a.m. to get to bed at least 11 or midnight, which I've been doing pretty steadily now for the last, I want to say 6 months. And that's been a 2 to 3 year, I guess, journey to get to that. And I had to do a lot of inner work and a lot of intentional pausing and stopping and writing down in the mornings and in the evenings, sort of where my energy levels were at. And going back and seeing that, the nights that I very intentionally, with a lot of resistance, kicking and screaming, went to bed at a reasonable hour, noticed that I felt better the next day. Also, what I did before bed made a big difference in that transition, being hydrated throughout the day and in the evening, figuring out what works for you and your energy management, because it's going to be different for all of us. And once I saw the pattern of oh, I feel way better if I get enough sleep, and getting enough exercise to help me sleep better. I kept on having to remind myself, like, okay, this is why I want to have a healthier sleep hygiene routine. I could have all the strategies in the world, but if it doesn't matter enough to me to remember how I know that I'll feel the next day, there's no alarm or app or strategy that's going to work more than us saying, like, this is what matters to me and this is why, because it will affect how we show up at work, at home, for our friends, for our family. So just little things to keep in mind, I guess, before employing any strategies. And because that's what I had to do. And that was my experience with getting to where I am now. I hope that's helpful.
And I'll say too that, like, sleep, getting to bed on time has been one of probably my most lifelong struggles that I've had. And, I keep making progress, then I slip, and I make progress and I slip. What I will say is, no matter how hard that battle feels, it is worth it to stay on it, because when our sleep sucks, our brain sucks. It is one of the most impairing things we can do to our ADHD is to regularly not be getting enough sleep. Kat?
Baby steps. I think when MJ was talking, for the people who can't see what she did, she used air quotes for reasonable hour. And I think a lot of times we may be going from 4 or 5 hours and all of us, we're like, I want to get 8 hours. So making those reasonable steps, I think baby steps are important.
So leverage accountability too. If you're using a sleep app, you can in the morning take a screenshot of your sleep app to show to the other person that's maybe also working on getting to bed on time, what time you actually went to bed. And one of the things too that I think that, and why this is such a common issue, because most people with ADHD, when we talk to them, it's like once they close their eyes and hit the heads on the pillow, they fall asleep pretty quickly. The issue is not everyone, but I think mostly. And the issue is this term sleep procrastination. And I think part of what that is there's so many sort of executive functions required in the getting ready for bed process. And at that time of the day, our meds have worn off. Our executive function is as low as it's going to be for the day. So all those things are hard. So little things like if you want to get your pajamas on before dinner, little things like that can be really helpful. So keep experimenting, because there's all different kinds of things that can work. And it is one of these things where it takes a lot of experimentation. All right, let's do another question, and then we got to take a quick break here. All right, we got Gerald.
Hello.
Hello. What is your question?
I would like some suggestions on how we manage expectations for those who do not understand us. What are some good ways of explaining, maybe in a more subtle way that is more acceptable to the general public? What would you say to somebody who has no idea what is ADHD about?
And you're working with them?
Yeah, sometimes they are family, sometimes they are colleagues, and sometimes it can just be my clients.
Okay. I do think that there's some differences on how we respond to family, versus colleagues or clients.
Let's just run with family and friends, since these are the ones we can't run away from, so to speak.
Well, when we think about boundaries, right? Knowing what you will tolerate and what you won't tolerate, and be kind of clear about that, right? I think whenever we are trying to explain something in the realm of how something is impacting us because of our ADHD, because I know that a lot of people, they don't want to use it as an excuse, as an explanation, but how do you actually make that distinction? I think if you say something is hard because of your ADHD, the next step then becomes more the explanation. Say, and this is what I'm doing to try to address this, or asking for, can I do it this way instead? Or I do best in this kind of environment. So really sharing what you need to be successful to do something. Because regardless of what the diagnosis is, looking at I remember, and this isn't so much of an issue anymore. I remember whenever I would be with my family, and especially with my mom, and she would say, call me when you get home. I hated that, because I knew that I am probably not going to remember to call you when I get home. She said, well, I just want to know if there's an emergency, or if I'm if it's an emergency, I'm calling 911, not you, right? So it's explaining that it's not that I don't care about you, but somebody else's worry is actually their problem, not yours. So don't own that as your problem. So I know it's different with family than it is with friends. With friends, like, explain what's going on, explain what you need. And if they don't agree to that, or they're continuing to make you feel judged and feel crappy all the time, might be time to find new friends.
Yeah.
Kat?
Do I remember, Gerald, that you talked to us about your dad?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay. I thought so. So you said that you put some of those practices to work. Are there any of those that you can use or maybe try on with other people?
It takes a lot of work, and you have to see what you can do. So, for example, one of the things that drove me up the wall is he loves to cook, and he insists on the whole family coming together to eat, even though it's we might be working. We're working from home a lot these days, and he'll come banging on the door. So recently we've gotten a bell because I'm not the only one working from home in the household, but it created a new problem where I confused it with the neighbors' prayers because they use a bell too, and it's the same sound. So the whole process was you have to fix one problem at a time, but it is slow. This is just one problem fixed, and I'm like, wow, it's a lot of more problems. The one I just had yesterday was he called me up and says, I need help tomorrow. And I'm like, excuse me. But I can't say no.
Wait, you answered your phone during the workday?
Oh, no. The time that he asked me for help, I would be available. The problem is that saying no would cause him to blow up. Yeah, I know it's unreasonable, but I live in the same house.
Okay, so he was asking you in person?
Yes, it's like, I need help tomorrow.
Well, it sounds like he wasn't really asking you then.
Exactly. It's not.
You might want to even say something like, are you actually asking me? Because I'm busy tomorrow, and I feel if I say no, like, my concern is that you're going to get upset and take that out on me. And I'm not okay with that, right? Because part of boundary work is not just saying no, but also saying, like, where are the parameters that you will say yes to?
I want to add, first of all, if you've done that, Gerald, with your dad, I mean, congratulations. You took what we said and you're putting it into play. And I think it's the same type of process with other friends and family. The other thing I was going to say is I try to remember that most people can only understand through their own lens. So if they don't experience it, they may not understand where we're coming from. So with that, it's kind of the same in the workplace. We don't always have to disclose to ask for an accommodation. So the same thing with friends and family, we may not have to say, hey, because of my ADHD, this would make it easier. If I'll say, hey, can you do this thing? And they say, can you text me so that I don't forget? Yep, let's do that. So those things, we don't always, I'll just say we don't owe everyone an explanation. When I was saying earlier about understanding my friends better or understanding who I can have it in my close friend circle, that's a big part of it. If it's someone who will continually not understand where I might unintentionally fail as a friend, then I'm probably not going to keep them in my close circle.
To expand on that, because that part is quite relevant when it comes to work. One thing I learned a lot from one of my previous jobs as a consultant is that the person who has expectations on you, your client, it's actually quite important to say what you can't do, but in a holistic way where if you do it this way, this is what's going to happen. If you do it that way, that's what's going to happen.
Yes.
It works well when you are the subject matter expert, but it can become quite a problem when you are not. And you're in a society where I'm from, saying that you don't know is very much looked down upon. It's either a yes or a no kind of response. I don't know, I need to get back to you. It's not an acceptable response in a lot of situations, whether in those words or any other words.
I'm just giving some thought to that, because that's tough. It's I'm not going to pretend to know fully your culture, but I also know there's lots of things that you're like that I push back on because I think it's dumb, right? Like, it doesn't work for me, right?
Yeah. So I think just to relate those situations, it will be, can you make it for this event? Can you get it done? And if I were to say, like, I'm not sure, the response could come back something like, hey, you stupid or what?
Well, MJ, do you have
just the last thing that I want to say that sort of, I hope it kind of ties it all together is, when somebody makes a comment to you of, why can't you just figure it out? Why can't you just work harder? Why do you have to, why are you so dumb? My gut reaction is like, oh my God, what? I am actually really smart. But when you are confronted with trying to advocate for yourself, or when you are confronted with somebody lashing out at you when you say no, or when you set a boundary, a question that is continuing to be helpful for me is, okay, so I'm saying no, and this is why. What do you think my experience is when you treat me that way? And what that causes is for the other person to maybe activate on a part of empathy that maybe they're not really used to having to use, right? You're not fighting back. All that you're asking when you're setting a boundary is, what do you think my experience is when you treat me that way, or when you react that way to something that I'm asking for? So that's been helpful for me, and it's a slow process, but I hope that helps in the long term.
We're going to take one more quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to get to one more question here. So we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our patrons over at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Are the stories that you hear on this show the ADHD experiences you can relate to? What other ways do you find value in tuning into this show every week? If you enjoy the show and want to support our work, then consider becoming a patron by going to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. We got perks starting at just $5 a month, and support can start at any amount that makes sense to you. I want to thank Jahan J, and my apologies if I didn't pronounce that correctly, and Mark W, who joined us on Patreon this week. We appreciate your support, and we welcome you to the Patreon community. When you become a patron at $5 a month or more, you will get access to ad-free episodes of this show. And if you become a patron at the $25 a month level, you can join me and other patrons for our monthly coaching call every fourth Tuesday of the month. We are taking a break this month for the month of December, which means our next monthly coaching call is on Tuesday, January 24th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Mark your calendars if you're considering becoming a patron at the $25 a month level, so we can see you next month on Tuesday, January 24th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 Eastern. And a huge thank you to all of our patrons who support us each and every month. If it is in your budget right now, consider becoming a patron over at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Remember, perks start at just $5 a month, and you can get ad-free episodes at that level, and support can start at any amount that makes sense to you. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. And thanks. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from you, our listeners who tune in every week. Thank you. If you've been able to add new tools to your ADHD toolbox from tuning in to this show, then consider subscribing so you can gather more ideas to help your ADHD management and continue hearing stories from even more ADHD brains just like us. Go to ADHDrewired.com or hit subscribe or follow in your favorite podcast player. Next week, Brittany Berger joins us on the show, where we're going to have a conversation around hustle culture and toxic productivity. Another episode you might enjoy is episode 452, where we talk with David Greenwood about overcoming burnout. And did you know ADHD Rewired is not alone? Not only will we have 2 new shows that are in the works right now that will be hosted by ADHD Rewired coaches Kat Hoyer and Kristen Martz, you can also tune into our other podcasts, including Hacking Your ADHD with Will Kerr, ADHD Essentials with Brenda Mahan, and ADHD Diversified with MJ Siemens. By the way, if you're listening to this episode on the day it came out, today will be our last live Q&A of the year. That's happening today, December 13th at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. So if you want to join me and the rest of the ADHD Rewired team live, then go to ADHDrewired.com/events to register so you can meet us on Zoom and interact with us and all of our listeners in real time. Find everything ADHD Rewired, including our other shows, announcements, events, other resources for every episode of this podcast, stuff about our coaching groups, our adult study hall programs, and the rest at ADHDrewired.com. That's ADHDrewired.com. By the way, my 42nd birthday is coming up in a couple weeks on December 29th, and a rating and review will be the best birthday gift you could give, especially if you've been thinking about leaving a rating and review. So Apple Podcasts accepts reviews. There are other platforms that accept reviews. Even Audible has this podcast, and you can leave a review there. So thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn more about everything we do. And thanks. All right, Vera, you are going to be our last question.
Hi. I found your podcast by searching PMDD because I struggled a lot in the past with PMDD. And then I found this episode where you talked about it. Basically, my question is the same. So I don't know if it makes any sense to ask that, but I know that there's a lot of women who also struggle with the fact that the meds don't work, even if they don't have PMDD during ovulation and post-ovulation. I don't know if there's any solution to that. If anyone found out if it's better to increase the meds or if it's better to leave them out completely, but it's really individual, I guess. So I haven't really figured out what can I do when it just doesn't work, because I feel like I'm just losing days.
Okay. Let's first maybe just tell listeners who don't know what PMDD stands for.
So it's premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and it's basically PMS, but it's way worse. So it's after ovulation until the first or second day of menstruation. It can also be in the end of the period. So it's really individual as well, but it's maybe comparable to bipolar disorder or mood disorder. So it's not really like a hormonal way.
Mm. So I know that there are prescribing protocols out there that fluctuate the actual dosage you're on based on where you are in your cycle.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, I'm not sure. Kristen's, I can tell she's looking at something right now.
I'm trying to find the person who has written books and does research on this that might have a plethora of information out there.
All right. Yeah.
I personally have not experienced this. I don't personally experience PMDD, but what I've heard is a lot of experimentation, a lot of working with your doctor, it's so individualized that there's no fluffy answer. It is going to take a lot of work. Kristen threw it in the chat. I think Sari Solden. A lot of experimentation, talking with your doctor if you need to, researching who you can go to. And it might even take 2 or 3 different visits with different practitioners to be able to do that experimentation. Because I know that some doctors just don't want to help with the experimentation and don't want to help with the monitoring of, experimenting with medications. So research, a lot of self-advocacy. But yeah, I hope you're able to find what you need, because the people that I do know that experience that, like, it's tough and it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, but that episode already helped me a year ago when I listened to it. There were a lot of similar experiences in that episode, so it really opened my eyes to what I can do to make my life easier.
Well, thank you for your question. Sorry, I didn't have a bunch of information that I could offer on that. And I think that what MJ was saying about experimentation is like, that's kind of our go-to answer for most things about what to do. Because it's true. Because this stuff's complicated, and there is no like one size fits all for anything that we're doing here, whether it's around medication or strategies for bedtime or how to talk to your father who is knocking on your door when you're trying to work, right? There's so many different approaches that need to be tried. And I think if we are clear on our why and what we're trying to solve and we keep at it, we'll get there. It takes time. Thanks so much for your question.
Thank you.
I think we actually only have one more question that we need to get to. So let's just do that, and then we're going to call it a show. And
Eric has one more thing-itis.
Yeah, it's true. One more thing-itis, indeed. But Jesse is going to be the beneficiary of that one more thing-itis. All right. Jesse, what is your question?
I have to switch medical insurance. And with that, I'm going to have to start completely over with a whole new provider system, a whole new doctor. I got to find a new psychiatrist, new everything. And I have not done this since getting diagnosed and starting medication only about a year ago, not even a year ago. So I was just wondering if any of you, maybe Kat in particular, having your HR background, have some tips on things to look for, when finding a new doctor before I make this decision. Are there any red flags? Are there any green flags? I know that medication coverage, like generics versus brand name, has been an issue right now. Like I can't get on Vyvanse because it's too expensive. It's not covered. Hopefully next year. So I'm looking at like prescription coverages, but as far as seeing a psychiatrist or working with a doctor, my current provider, one of the reasons I'm switching is because I saw 4 doctors that just kind of dismissed me before I went outside, and I've been paying $150 a month out of pocket to see a specialist for my medications. So before I get myself kind of locked into that same situation, I'm really overwhelmed by like all the medical terms, the research, the benefit lists, what to look for. Any advice would be appreciated.
Can you call an insurance agent instead of trying to do this research online?
I can. I don't do well with phone calls. It helps me more to have information that I can kind of copy and paste and reorganize into a list that I can reference later. If I'm on a phone, I feel like I'm just scrambling to keep up.
What if you ask an insurance agent to send you the information so you can review it? But I think that way you can sort of share what the things you're kind of confused by. When I was going through this process, I was probably just as confused as anybody else was. Unfortunately, at least in the US, like insurance is just it's just ridiculously confusing.
Yeah.
And maybe even starting with like asking like your network of people, like, does anybody know anyone I can talk to? Like that can be a really great place to start versus just like Googling insurance agents. But, they're there to help you, and because I couldn't make sense of the different plans at all. Like there was just way too much information, and it's like my brain just was going to explode from this stuff. So I'm like, all right, so here's what I need. Like, what do you recommend? And then that's kind of just the approach that I took.
Is that like a broker, or I'm not even sure where to start to find somebody for that?
I do know some insurance companies themselves, and maybe if they're providers for certain organizations or companies, because I have some friends who are clinicians and they needed a break from clinical work, and they will go and they're called case managers, but it's not that kind of case management that we see in direct care. It is they help define what's available through that insurance provider policy. That may be a question to ask is, do you guys have policy case managers that can help me explore what's available to me? And I wanted to offer this because I work, have to do lots of phone calls with insurances as a billing provider, a service provider, and have to do billing. Allow yourself to pause them and have them slow down and use a lot of stating back reflective comments. So what I hear is this, and you repeat it back, what you heard. That way they can provide you corrections and gives you a chance to write it down. Because they are fast paced because they're used to doing this all the time. It's really not about them trying to antagonize us or intimidate us.
Usually it's not.
So I have found some of the best people. I mean, that is what's kept me making those phone calls. But yeah, maybe start there and asking, I don't know who you're with or if you already have a plate, but calling and saying, hey, who could tell me about policies? I specifically need this kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like whenever I'm reaching out to any provider, whether it's an insurance company or trying to find a new accountant, one of my go-to lines is, I need this explained Sesame Street simple. Like my brain doesn't understand this stuff. So like, don't use acronyms. I want you to explain it to me. Give me metaphors to help me make sense of it. And if you don't think you can do that, can you pass me along to somebody who can?
Explain like I'm 5.
Yes.
And the other thing is because I'm self-employed now, so I don't have a benefits provide. Like I have, I'm trying to find that. And the few that I have called were very scripted. Like they weren't really answering my questions. They were reading off of a script.
Do you have any colleagues that are doing similar types of work that you're doing that you can ask if they're self-employed, like who they use?
Yes, but nobody that I know with ADHD specifically being kind of the issue that they're looking into.
Kat?
All of that part of HR for me was always the most confusing. So I was going to just simply go, no, I don't. I don't have any advice for you, but I do. And I was thinking that you are self-employed. So I would say a broker is a great place to start. there are a lot of small business brokers that could help you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, worst case scenario, I can keep paying $150, but I know that's been a red flag for my current provider that I'm going outside to get this medication just because they won't talk to me at all about it.
Ask them, and they will, to send you things. So in addition to explaining to me in very simple terms, ask them to send you everything, because you said you like reading it more. And, just like anything else, I think saying, I'm kind of uncomfortable with phone calls. Thank you for your patience with me. I'm a little uncomfortable making phone calls. I'm a little uncomfortable with this process. I really appreciate your help through it. Those kinds of things, it puts you both at ease, because then you get that sort of elephant in the room that they don't even know about out of the way. And again, brokers will work with several different organizations to be able to help you choose the right one.
Thanks.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Now, Will lost, I guess, internet connection. So in the spirit of Will, who usually leaves us with a dad joke, did you hear the rumor about butter? Well, I'm not going to spread it. Mm-hmm.
Where's MJ's wah-wah? Nice.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for your questions. Thank you for all our panelists and coaches for being here. We do this every month, same time, same station, all the good stuff. So thank you. This is a really fun part of our month, getting to chat with all of you and answer some of your questions. So we'll see you back here next month. This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD Rewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you are a member of CHAD, ADA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all the shows on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by by James Clear, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni, Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson, The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer, The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk, Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang, The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins, Make It Stick, The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown, The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey, Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden, The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin, The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great, starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD Rewired. Click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tibbers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.